All right, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and call this morning's meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Gonzalez?
Present.
I'm sorry, can you speak into the mic?
Here.
McCann is absent. Donovan?
Here.
Montgomery Stepp?
Here.
Goebel?
Here.
Leyba Gonzalez?
Here.
Dillard is absent. Mendoza?
Here.
Bush is absent. Frank?
Here.
Moreno?
Present.
Elo Rivera is absent. Campillo?
Here.
Whitburn?
Here.
Hall?
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's begin with non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who'd like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do. We have several. Ozzy Menendez, please make your way to the podium.
Buenos dias. Good morning, members of the MTS board. First and foremost, I extend my deepest gratitude for your dedication to service and for granting me the privilege to address you today as a member of the public. My name is Ozzy Meneses, also known in some circles as Oz or Oswaldo. My professional journey started in these very halls where I began as an MTS bus scheduler. My career path saw me rise to the position of South Bay planner, where I was fortunate to manage the final design, construction, and eventual implementation of the South Bay Rapid, among other projects. Later, my responsibility shifted to operations, including oversight of MTS contracted services and the performance metrics of the entire Rapid system. My career path then took a turn north, leading me to the Bay Area to work for a civil engineering firm where I engaged in a variety of projects encompassing express bus services, transportation plans, and the future San Jose BART subway extension. Over time, my focus shifted from engineering and planning to public affairs, government relations, and significant community engagement. Upon returning to San Diego, I found a renewed dedication in public affairs, continuing my journey in this field. Today, as I embark on establishing my own consulting firm, my passion for serving communities has been reignited. I'm committed to giving our communities a voice by collaborating with nonprofits, small businesses, and government agencies. My goal is to engage with
30
our
seconds
leaders to enhance the well-being of our communities, and I cordially invite you to join me in this endeavor. Together, we can foster growth and prosperity in our communities. Thank you once again for this opportunity. I'm eager to collaborate with you to achieve our shared vision for a better future for us and for our communities. Thank you.
Alex Wong, please unmute yourself now. Alex, it looks like you're still muted.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, my name is Alex Wong, and I am the data researcher for Ride SD. At Sandag's last board meeting, Vice Chair Goebel asked about where a people mover depot would be located and how the people mover would be operated. These are good questions, and they're valid questions that I've thought long and hard about. But fortunately, there are good answers to that. A people mover depot would require surprisingly little land. In 2019, Miami's people mover carried 33,000 riders daily. It services a fleet of 46 people mover vehicles at just one depot, covering less than an acre of land, smack in the center of downtown, right next to freeway on-ramps and right below an elevated train viaduct. If Miami can fit a people mover on 1 acre of land in such a constrained location, surely San Diego can do the same on a 5-acre site, perhaps at the port headquarters, who has offered their land for a people mover station. Moreover, I fully support MTS running the people mover, charging passengers the same $2.50 flat fee to ride the people mover as on other MTS lines, and giving people movers the same paint job as seen on trolleys. This consistent fare system and branding would help attract riders to the people mover and better integrate it with the existing MTS system. In Miami, the same agency runs both the heavy rail and the people mover, so it's completely possible for MTS to run both the trolley and the people mover. People mover critics say people movers have little seating, forcing passengers to stand. However, this is primarily true only of people movers that never leave the airport. Tokyo's Eureka Moment is a 9.1-mile line that uses Mitsubishi people mover technology, but because it travels entirely outside the airport, the trains have far more seating than they would if they were airport people movers.
Next is the original DRA. Please unmute yourself now.
So it's interesting because I had called into the executive committee last week, and or whenever the last meeting was. And I didn't realize that what I was saying, I didn't fully understand. And so I was telling you guys that you were, transporting the illegals from Iris and whatnot, but I found out that's not true. They're in the charter buses. So, they get their information from these NGOs to tell them where to go. And how to take public transit, that they can take the trolley that to Old Town and then take a free shuttle to the airport. But it turns out they have charter buses, so they don't even need to take MTS. But I did find it interesting that they are littering so badly outside of the transit center. And they're just, piling up there, just waiting for that charter bus to come because, Border Patrol drops them off after they've been processed, because those are the street releases, they traffic the children and the women and other people in the hotels. But I thought it was interesting to see the two MTS workers come and have to clean up the trash. And they said that, they do that twice a day. There's two shifts that come in and do it. And so it's interesting that the people are, how much money is that costing to have the people come and clean up after these individuals that are just littering the streets with either their, potato sacks that they've got, or, their tickets that come on their bag from DHS, or, their
30 seconds left.
wristbands. And so I'm just wondering what that's costing us to have them go and clean this up twice a day, which it could probably be done more, because I mean, the amount of litter and trash that they, just put all over the place, it's just quite interesting. So anyway, thanks.
Blair Beekman, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. Yeah, I just wanted to offer, it's nice to be here at public transit meeting. Thank you. I wanted to just thank yourselves that for the Route 3 bus, you, I think, speed up its, in the past few years, and since the strike, you speeded up its timetable, in that it would arrive once every 15 minutes to locations. It's now at 12 minutes. And that's nice. Thank you for trying to do that. I think that if that has been the case, it can set a really good example for other bus lines to offer a more frequency of service. And the 3 is possibly can be a good example of that. So I just wanted to call and thank yourselves for that today. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's move on to our consent items, which are items 3 through 18. Clerk, is there any public comment on the consent items?
There are not.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent items?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion
Second.
from Member Hall, and we have a second from Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Excuse me, I just wanted to confirm, I believe that one member was going to abstain from a couple of items on the consent calendar.
Yes, items 10 and 11. I abstain from those two, please.
All right. Any further discussion? Any other abstentions? Seeing none, then that motion passes unanimously with Director Leyva Gonzalez abstaining on items 10 and 11. All right, that brings us to our discussion and report items, beginning with item 19, fiscal year 2024 operating budget mid-year amendment, and we'll invite Gordon Meyer to present this item.
Good morning. My name is Gordon Meyer. I'm the manager of financial planning here at MTS. This morning, I'm going to provide the presentation for the proposed FY24 operating budget amendment. So before we look at the numbers, I wanted to give a brief overview of the budget development process. So the original budget was adopted on May 18th of last year. Since then, we've been coming to the board with monthly financial status updates where we identify year-to-date variances as well as major trends. As far as the FY24 mid-year amendment process goes, we met with every manager and reviewed all of the expense and revenue assumptions for every department. We also compiled a list of all position change requests, and then in February, we consolidated all of our budget adjustments into the amended budget that you're seeing today. And so we presented this amended budget to the Budget Development Committee last week, and then we hope to receive adoption today. And then a side note, we've also been working on the FY25 operating budget concurrently. That's a zero-based budgeting process that we build from the ground up. We still have a lot of work to do on that front. We have multiple BDC meetings planned, and then we plan for ultimate adoption at the public hearing board meeting scheduled for May 16th of this year. So getting into the numbers, first we'll look at passenger levels or ridership. So the original budget included a forecast of 80.7 million passengers for FY24. That budget target was 16% over last year's final actual ridership after adjusting for the strike. So far in the first half of our fiscal year, which is July through December, we averaged 9.5% year-over-year growth, so well short of that 16% target. Based on the trend in the first half of the year, we're amending the passenger forecast down to 76.5 million passengers, which is a reduction of 4.3 million from the original budget, or 5.4%. And so that new target represents just under 10% year-over-year growth, so fairly similar to what we've experienced in the first half of the year, but well short of the original target. And then visually, you can see that on the chart to the right. The orange line is our original budget. The blue line is last year's final ridership. And then the purple line is what we're forecasting for the remainder of the year, as well as the actuals for the first half of the year. So we looked at ridership. Now we'll see how that translates into revenue. So the original budget for passenger revenue was 78.9 million. That target was 14.5% over last year's final revenue. So far in the first half of the year, we were $2.2 million unfavorable to budget, or 5.8%. During that time, average fare was unfavorable to budget by 2.3%. We had budgeted 98 cents. We were coming in around 96 cents. And then overall in the first half of the year, we were averaging 6.1% year-over-year growth versus that 14.5% target in the original budget. And so based on our new ridership assumptions and our average fare assumption, we're reducing the passenger revenue budget by $4.4 million, or 5.5% in the amended budget. And that new target represents 8.1% year-over-year growth now, which is a little better than what we've seen in the first half of the year. And that's mainly because we do expect the average fare to be higher in the second half of the year, based on how some of the UCSD pass revenue is spread. And then you can see that visually once again with the original budget is the orange line, last year's budget, the blue line, and then our new forecast, the purple line. So within operating revenue, we have passenger revenue and then other operating revenue. So now we'll look at some of the other operating revenue. A major category within that subcategory is energy credits. MTS generates revenue from both the state low carbon fuel standard, or LCFS program, as well as the federal renewable identification number, or RINs programs. For both these programs, we generate credits based on our consumption of renewable natural gas, which is CNG, electricity, as well as propane. In both these programs, either MTS directly sells or vendors sell on our behalf the credits that we generate. And on average, we earn about $8 million per year from these programs combined. And so the main driver in variances each year is really the credit prices. So I wanted to give an update on those. So for the LCFS, we originally budgeted $92.50 on average for the credit price. You can see on the chart on the top right, the red line. It starts at $85, and then we had it growing to $100. That was based on some Air Resources Board guidance that was published. They had revised the carbon intensity targets for the state as a whole. That was expected to drive up demand for these credits, as companies would need to purchase more credits to meet their carbon, the overall state carbon goals. And so you can see that hasn't happened, the yellow line. So we started the year at around $75, and then we've only averaged a credit price of $70.54, so well short of the $92 target. And so for the remainder of the year, we are including a price target of $70 per credit. Fortunately, the RIN side has outperformed what we were expecting, and it's made up for the decrease in LCFS credit prices. So on the RIN side, we budgeted $2 per credit, which in the bottom chart is the red line. And you can see from January to April, the blue line, which was last year's credit price, was hovering right around $2. And so that's why we went with that last year. And fortunately, we started the year at over $3. And then we've averaged $3.15 per credit this year. And so for the amended budget, for the remainder of the way, we're assuming $3.10 per RINs. And so on a combined basis, we're increasing the energy credit budget by $470,000 or 4.4% because that RINs performance has more than made up for the poor LCFS performance. Next, within other operating revenue, we have interest revenue. So we originally budgeted 1.9 million, which is the red bar to the right. As we know, interest is a function of cash balances and interest rates. Prior to FY23, we averaged 60 to 70 million per year. In FY23, we had an average cash balance of 144 million. And then for FY24, we're projecting 180 million. And those high cash balances are really due to stimulus drawdowns, as well as we have a lot sitting in our operating deficit reserve. And we also started receiving higher FTA formula funds a couple of years ago as well. And so you couple the high cash balances with the federal interest rate being at the 22-year high of 5.5%, and we end up with the green bar to the right. And so we are amending the budget for interest to 8.3 million for FY24, which is an increase of 6.4 million from the original budget. Next, with another operating revenue, we have real estate related revenues. So here we're increasing the budget by 520,000 or almost 20%. That's reflecting the new Grantville station development. That was a TOD developed with Greystar. We're starting to receive that lease revenue this year, and so we're just reflecting that in the amended budget. And then lastly, we have a category for other, which includes a variety of different revenue sources, and that's projected to decrease by 500,000. So overall, the other operating revenue is increasing by 6.5 million in the amended budget, or 26.1%, and the main story there is the increasing interest revenue. So we looked at operating revenues. The other portion of our operating budget, as far as revenues goes, is the subsidy revenue, which includes both our grants and our sales taxes. So first we'll look at the sales tax revenues, and first we'll look at Transnet. So Transnet has two pieces. There's the formula share, which is dependent upon cash receipts or sales tax cash receipts. And then there's also the direct reimbursement that we received from Sandag for BRT and Mid-Coast services. And so on the formula side, we originally used Sandag's budget of 430 million for the region. At the time, that represented 1% growth over the FY23 budget. Our share of that, after sharing it regionally, is 46.8 million. So far, through January, cash receipts for Transnet are actually trailing last year's figures. However, we're not too concerned because the trend has been skewed due to postponed filing deadlines at the state level. So they postponed the filing deadlines for tax returns for businesses that were impacted by last year's winter storms. And so they expect bigger pickups in the second half of the year. So we're still expecting it coming close to the budget overall. You can see the orange bar to the right. That was Sandag's original budget for the region. The yellow bar is by a company called Avenue, which Sandag hires to do their own independent sales tax forecasts. They're projecting higher than Sandag, and we also do our own forecast as well, and we're kind of right in the middle. So we don't have any concerns with meeting the original budget, and we're not amending the budget at this time. On the direct reimbursement side, we're increasing the budget slightly for Transnet by 212,000, and that's as a result of increasing net expenses for those BRT and Mid-Coast services combined. So next, we have another sales tax revenue. We'll look at TDA, or Transportation Development Act. So for this revenue source, we know exactly what we're going to receive every year. We file a claim with Sandag in the beginning of the year. If the sales tax receipts come in higher than that claim amount, then the excess funds go into a reserve at the county level. And then if the receipts come in lower than what we claimed, then we draw from that reserve at the county. And so this year's overall budget for TDA was 136 million. 93 million of that is in the operating budget, with the rest in capital. TDA is tracking very similarly to Transnet right now, so we don't have any concerns with meeting that budget. We're guaranteed to receive that budget, and so we're not amending the claim or the budget. Next, we have state transit assistance, or STA. So that is the state sales tax on diesel fuel, and it's a formula fund. Our original budget was based on the January 2023 state controller's report, and it was an overall target of 39.4 million. 11.3 million of that was in the operating budget, with the remainder in capital. We have an updated forecast based on the January 24 governor's budget proposal, which now projects 36.5 million, which is a decrease of 2.9 million from the original budget. We won't know the final number until the May governor's budget is published. So we are going to build this $2.9 million decrease into our amended budget because it's the best information that we have. And we're decreasing the amount in the operating budget from 11.3 to 8.4 million so that we can keep the capital budget whole. And then with operations, we can backfill that decrease in STA with stimulus funds. Next, within subsidy revenue still, we have the new SB 125 funding. So that was the $4 billion in state funding that was distributed to the transit agencies through the TIRCP program. It's a formula fund that can be used for both operations and capital, but it has to meet very strict criteria on increasing service, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and serving disadvantaged communities. The original legislation indicated that we'd receive 284 million over multiple fiscal years. We are still expecting to receive year one of those funds, but there has been talk at the state level that the remaining years might be under threat as they address the budget shortfalls. However, we know for certain that we need to include 4.5 million in the FY24 amended budget, which includes 3 million for IRIS rapid operations and then 1.5 million for security enhancements, which was the additional security staff that were hired as approved by the board. So here we have a summary of our revenues. So operating revenues are increasing by $2 million or 2% overall. That's really favorable interest revenue being partially offset by that dip in passenger revenue. As we look below that, we can see the subsidy revenue. So federal subsidy is decreasing by 305,000. That is an FTA route restoration grant that we'd received. We still plan on receiving that funding, but we're pushing it to next year based on when we think we're going to spend the dollars that we do the draws based on. And then the drivers here is really the STA decrease of 2.9 million, which we talked about, and then the SB 125. 4.5 million, including those new one-time funds in the operating budget. And so subsidy overall is increasing by 1.4 million in the amended budget. And then last line, we have reserves. So the original budget, we planned on adding about 33.9 million to the operating deficit reserve at the end of the year. Based on this budget proposal, we're only able to add 30.4 million to the reserves, and that's really due to an increase in the structural deficit, which we'll get to on a later slide. So overall revenue is increasing by just under 7 million or 1.7%. So moving on to the expense budget. So first we'll look at personnel, and within personnel we'll look at wages. So administration wages are increasing by $2 million or 10.5%. The main driver here is the increase in headcount. We had the 47 new security positions that were approved by the board. 45 of those plan to be hired by the end of FY24, and so we built the budget based on the planned hiring schedule. We also hired 4 new FTEs this year to support the call center. In total, we're increasing the headcount within administration by 60 FTEs. 59 of those were approved by the board already. There was also an additional request for a staff attorney position, which I believe was an item today that just got approved. The Bus operations wages are increasing in the amended budget by 556,000 or 1.2%. The primary driver here is student or training wages on the bus side, as well as maintenance wages. So we've been offering more classes and we have better enrollment as we continue to do our push to hire drivers. And so we're reflecting those additional dollars. On the maintenance side, we've just used more hours, and it's really been a shift from PTO to straight time hours. As far as FTEs on the bus operator side or bus operations side, we're reflecting an increase of 2.5 FTEs. So we're hiring 3 bus trainers, and then we're reducing 1 part-time bus operator position. We don't have any part-time bus operators, so this is really just a cleaning up of the position table. On the trolley side, wages are projected to increase by 1.1 million or 3.1%. So operator wages are increasing by 458,000 or 4%. That's mostly overtime as well as an increase in projected training hours. On the flagging side, we're increasing wages by 239,000 or 12.7%. Once again, it's an increase in the hours. We have rather large variances year to year in some of these categories based on how well turnover is going. And so we see that fluctuate, and that's what this is here. Facilities, that's the service person wages. We're increasing the budget by 336,000 or 11.3%, once again due to using more hours than we did in the couple of years prior. And so for trolley operations, we're amending the budget with an increase of 24.3 FTEs. 4.8 of those have already been approved by the board. Specifically, we hired 4 construction safety supervisors, which were new positions. And then the board has already approved a shift of 5 part-time train operators to 5 full-time operators. The remaining request is for an additional 19.5 FTEs to support the SB 125 funded activities, specifically hiring 15 part-time construction safety flag persons, as well as 12 full-time operators to accommodate the additional service next plan for next year, as well as the construction projects on the Orange Line. So wages overall are projected to increase by 3.7 million or 3.6% in total. So also within personnel, we have fringe benefits. So pension costs are increasing by 332,000. That's mostly the increase in the budget for the CalPERS payment for San Diego Trolley Union employees. We just missed that, so we're tightening it up based on the invoices. Healthcare is a big one. We're increasing the budget by 934,000 or 5.4%. So we've been trending unfavorable in San Diego Transit Union premiums and deductions. We've dissolved both of the trust funds for both the ATU and IBW over the last few years. Both those trust funds are fully dissolved now, and we're no longer using that to cover employee or employer contributions. And so we have a much better picture now of the actual premiums and contributions from each. And so we're reflecting just a much better picture of that budget now with better information. Also contributing to the healthcare is premiums across the board for the entire agency increased 12 to 13%, depending on the plan, versus we typically assume a 10% increase year over year. And so we're reflecting that in the budget as well. Paid absences are decreasing by 205,000. Workers' compensation is another big one. So we're increasing the budget by 458,000 or almost 11%. That's all claim payments within trolley operations. You can see on the bottom chart to the right, the green bar specifically is trolley claim payments. And you can see what we're budgeting now is much closer to what the real experience was in FY23. We had assumed a more normal year when we did the original budget for FY24, and we're really reflecting something that's much more resembling of last year. So next we'll look at outside services. So the biggest category within outside services is our purchase transportation cost, which includes our fixed route contract, which is with Transdev. We also have First Transit operates some of our fixed route service as well. They do the minibus, but primarily Transdev. And then also our ADA paratransit contract, which is operated by First Transit. And so on the fixed route side, if you'll remember in FY '23, we had reduced service due to the driver shortages. The plan was to add back most of that service in the FY '24 original budget, specifically in January of 2024. And so based on where we are today with our driver levels, we are reducing service levels to what we think is a more attainable goal of increasing service. And so the service levels are being reduced in the amended budget by 1.8% overall, with all of that being in TransDev on the fixed route side. First Transit minibus is actually increasing slightly. On the paratransit side, both volumes and expenses were fairly close to the original budget and targets, so we're not making any significant changes there. And so in terms of dollars, you can see in the chart or the table to the right that we're decreasing the budget by 1.6 million or 1.5%. And that's really due to the reduction in service levels on the TransDev side. Next, within outside services, we have a couple other categories. So this for security, that's the contracted security. We're tracking very nicely the budget so far, so a small reduction of 8,000 there. Repair and maintenance costs, so that's a big one that we're increasing by almost 2 million or 17.6%. The main driver here is the Orange Line tie replacement project. So we had originally budgeted 1.6 million for this project. Operations staff had requested 3.7 million originally, and we wanted to get the vendor under contract and then see how much they could actually accomplish before we put the 3.7 million in there. We now have the vendor under contract, and they've provided a schedule that suggests that they can get all that work done by March. And so we're putting the full 3.7 million in the amended budget. Engines and transmission overhaul costs are increasing by 171,000 or almost 24%. That's based on their experience in bus operations on the first half of the year. We've had some expensive overhauls, and so we're assuming a similar experience in the second half of the year. And then lastly, we have a category for other services, which overall are increasing by 84,000 or 0.4%. There's a lot going on within this category. It's really a shift mainly on timing of when we think different projects can get done. Those are listed below. Please feel free to ask any questions if you have any questions on those specifics. In total, these other outside services costs are increasing by 2.2 million or 4.6%. And then last slide on expenses, we have our remaining categories for the operating budget. So materials and supplies costs are increasing by 2.4 million or almost 15%. This is primarily in revenue vehicle parts, and within revenue vehicle parts, it's mostly on the trolley side, which is increasing by 1.7 million. It's increasing by about $500,000 on the bus side, and it's really a combination of inflation as well as expensive repairs. Risk management, we're decreasing the original budget by 557,000 or 6.1%. This is primarily claim-related legal expenses, which are coming in favorable, as well as we had some large recoveries in the first half of the year that we're reflecting. G&A costs are decreasing by 629,000 or 9.2%. We're reducing the budget for credit card processing fees related to the fare system based on the experience that we're seeing. And then we're also reducing the budget for advertising within the marketing department, not because we're slashing the budget, but just based on the actual anticipated spend. We have a new contractor that just started this year, and it's really based on what they think they can get done. And then lastly, we have a category for other, which includes leases and debt service, which is increasing by 42,000. So these other categories in total are increasing by 1.3 million or 3.8%. So here's a summary of the expenses. So personnel costs increasing by 5 million. That's mostly due to the increase in headcount. Purchase transportation coming down by 1.6 due to the service reduction on the TransDev side. Outside services are increasing by a little over 2 million. That's the tie replacement. Materials and supplies are increasing by 2.4. That's the revenue vehicle parts. And then energy, we didn't look at. We're trailing very close to our original budget for both CNG and electricity, which are the main drivers. And then risk management and other are also decreasing, as we've already talked about. So in total, expenses are increasing by just under $7 million in the amended budget. So here we have our look at our revenues and expenses combined, as well as a look at our structural deficit. And so you can see on the top line, we have our operating revenues, which are increasing by 2 million. Our recurring subsidy is decreasing by 3.1 million. That's primarily the drop in STA revenue. So our recurring revenues in total are decreasing by $1 million or 0.3%. While expenses are increasing by 7 million or almost 2%. And so you can see our structural deficit in the red line. We're now projecting a structural deficit of 59 million versus a $51 million structural deficit in the original budget. To get to our overall budget, we have to add back in the one-time funds. So we add back in the 4.5 million for SB 125 funding. Then we add back in the 85 million that we plan on drawing for federal stimulus funds. That is, the 85 million is not based on need, but rather what we can draw based on allowable expenses. And so we end up with excess revenue, and that's how we end up with the reserve contribution. And so we're planning on contributing 30 million to the operating deficit reserve at year end based on the amended budget versus a $34 million contribution in the original budget. And then just a brief update on the stimulus funds. So there were 360 million in total from the beginning of those programs. We've drawn 260 million of that to date. So we have about 100 million left to draw. 57 million of that is sitting in the operating deficit reserve now, and based on this amended budget, we plan on adding an additional 30 million to the operating deficit reserve at the end of the year. And then based on this draft, we do expect to have the structural deficit covered with both stimulus funds and SB 125 funds through FY28. Here we have just a high overview of the budget development calendar. So we met with the BDC last week. We have our presentation today where we look at the mid-year amendment and then the capital budget. At the end of March, we have a budget development committee to do our first look at the FY25 budget. Then we'll take that same presentation to the board on April 25th. And then we have our final BDC scheduled for May 8th, where we'll do our final look at FY25, and then we'll take that final look to the public hearing board meeting on May 16th, where we hope to receive adoption. And that brings me to the staff recommendation that the MTS Board of Directors enact resolution number 24-1, attachment B, amending the FY24 operating budget for the San Diego Metropolitan Transit System, San Diego Transit Corporation, San Diego Trolley, MTS Contract Services, as well as the Coronado Ferry. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Ms. Cooney.
Yes, I think Gordon did an excellent job of showing how fast we had to move this year to react to changes in funding structures, changing in the economy, changes in how we want to serve our customers. And that was something that, the budget committee, had the crystal ball last spring, but as we all know, in your own cities and the county, things are rapidly moving in San Diego these days. So we do have a lot of changes here, but it's reflective of our willingness to change and readjust as we need to react to those changes in the operating environment or in the economy. So a lot of ups and downs, and our budget team has had their work cut out for them this year.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. Blair can begin. Please unmute yourself now.
Hi, Blair Beekman. I wanted to speak on the consent calendar, but you moved so fast through it that it didn't allow the public enough time to raise my hand, really. An item on the consent calendar, item 9, I think will be a part of budget planning for, mid-budget planning. I hope I can speak on it at this time. Item 9 was about the future of updating surveillance tech on your buses.
Mr. Beekman,
Yes.
we do need to keep discussion at this time focused on item 19.
Well, as a mid-budget item, it's my assumption that the updating of surveillance technology is a part of your mid-budget planning. Is that not correct?
Is that correct, Mr. Meyer?
Correct.
Okay, you are correct. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, so I wanted to comment in updating your surveillance technology on your buses, your video cameras and the like. We're relying more and more on biometric technology in the use of our video surveillance, and that it's kind of my job and my role to remind yourselves that we have to be more clear on that subject, and we have to learn as policymakers how you can explain that to ourselves as the public, as a community process. We can't be afraid to talk about the subject,
30 seconds
and
left.
we have to be open to that subject matter. Good luck in describing that subject to the public. Thank you.
Next is the original DRA. Please unmute yourself now. It looks like you're still muted. The original DRA looks like you're still muted.
And that's it. Yes, so, or you can still listen to what I'm saying to MTS. So yeah, what you guys are doing with the influx in or increase in the budget for this 2024 operating budget, with the illegals that are being dropped off at the transit. When I had spoken a moment earlier, when I said that they're using the charter buses, they are, but then they're going to be they're being taken to Old Town, dropped off there, and then they take the airport shuttle to the airport. And with the massive increase in people that are being used, we're having to spend more money just to facilitate this trafficking of these people that are being left at that transit center. And it's in the several hundred per day. So it's not like it's just a few people here and there. There's probably more of them than that are riding this than actually ride the transit in the community. And so we are, obviously everybody can ride to the airport for free, but you still have to pay for it. And the people are the ones, fitting the bill. And then when you're having an increase in needing to have to clean up after these people that are, just littering the ground, I'm wondering how much of that $7 million increase is going to this, and not going to things that it could be facilitating that the people need in our community. And that's what's so sad is nobody wants to
30
talk about
seconds
this stuff.
left.
Everybody wants to ignore it like there's nothing to see here, but we're fitting the bill for this and it's affecting our communities, but everybody wants to ignore it. And it's like, if you want them in your community, why don't you bring them into your house and have them stay there? And you pay for it and you do what you want to do, but don't force the people to be engaging in the human trafficking that's going on, because this is very nefarious and these children are being lost, sold off, and trafficked and having their organs harvested. And so until you
Your
guys
time has
realize that it's
expired.
going to continue.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. We will now open board discussion on this item. It is an action item, so a motion would be appropriate, and we will begin with Director Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation. We had an extensive conversation at Budget Committee over Gordon's wonderful presentation and just the clarity of it. So I'm happy to make a motion to move staff's recommendation. Thank you again.
Thank you, Director Moreno. I will be happy to second that motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Clerk, please call the roll.
Gonzalez,
I vote yes.
McCann is absent. Donovan,
Yes.
Montgomery Stepp,
Yes.
Goble,
Yes.
Leiva Gonzalez,
Yes.
Dillard,
Yes.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Bush. Bush is absent. Frank,
Yes.
Moreno,
Moreno, yes.
Elo Rivera is absent. Campillo,
Yes.
Whitburn,
Yes.
Hall. Hall is absent. Oops. And the motion passes with 11 members voting yes and 4 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Item 20 is the fiscal year 2025 capital improvement program, and we will invite Mike Thompson to present this item.
Good morning. My name is Mike Thompson. I'm the Director of Financial Planning Analysis. I am joined by Eric Chang, who is our Transit Asset Management Program Manager and really drives this CIP process from the finance side. So we're here to talk about the 2025 Capital Improvement Program. We'll start with the available revenues. Gordon mentioned many of these revenue sources in his presentation. We do have a number of recurring revenues that we do share between capital and operations, including our federal formula funds, our Transportation Development Act funds, our state transit assistance funds. Another one that is just strictly for capital that does recur is our low carbon transit operations program funding, that is cap and trade funding used for zero emission buses. And within our CIP, we also try to keep all of our non-recurring funding in the CIP. It's funding that's one time in nature. We don't want to put that in the operating budget because the operating budget has recurring expenses. We try to match those non-recurring stuff in the CIP. And a lot of this is competitive grant programs where we receive funding for very specific purposes. We also receive other one-time funds that are just transfers or carryovers or things of that nature. In this capital improvement program, we do have a number of awards from Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program for the last couple of years that we're building into this budget. We also have a number of projects built in from Senate Bill 125 funding. This is also TIRSP formula funding. Over the next couple of years, as Gordon mentioned, we're also receiving another piece called Zero Emission Transit Capital Program. That will be over 4 years, and it will basically help our transition to battery electric buses. So all this type of funding we consider non-recurring. So we'll break down the revenues in the presentation between recurring and non-recurring, just to separate those two out. So looking at the funding available for this year, we have a net funding, federal funding in the CIP of almost $41 million. We have programmed about $46 million of TDA in capital, and the remainder will be in the operating budget. We have programmed $27.7 million of STA in the capital budget, and the remainder of that will be in the operating budget. We also receive another small piece of state transit assistance that is state of good repair related. That's about $5.3 million. And then the LCTOP that I mentioned, $8 million in this budget right now. And then we have our discretionary TRSP. These are awards that we received for very specific projects. That's $35.5 million. We have $43.3 million of SB 125 funding programmed in this CIP. And then we have $37 million of other non-recurring type stuff. So in total, we have over $243 million available for this CIP, the largest CIPs we've ever had. Of that, about $160 million is non-recurring in nature, and the rest will be recurring in nature. So with that much funding available, we'll get to how we sort of develop our CIP every year. We do have a number of guiding principles. Primarily, we have Board Policy 65, which is about transit asset management. And it states that MTS is committed to effectively managing its transit assets and maintain its system in a state of good repair to support safe, efficient, reliable transit services across the organization. And you heard us mention state of repair a lot, and majority of our funding every year goes towards just the upkeep of our existing system. And you can see the chart, we do a 20-year CIP, and the state of good repair need over the next 25 years is almost $3 billion alone. That's $140 million a year just to upkeep our existing system. And the majority of that is in just revenue vehicles on the bus side and the rail side. MTS is also required to comply with applicable maintenance regulations of the FTA, the Federal Railroad Administration, and the California Public Utilities Commission. So we use state of good repair to base capital project prioritization and other asset management decisions, looking at the condition, the performance, and then balance that with available funding, and then also balance with safety considerations and the evaluation of alternatives over the full life cycle of cost and benefits type analysis. So our process began in September of last year. Each department looks at their overall individual 20-year forecast, and they make updates to that, and then they actually submit project requests for the next 5 fiscal years, specifically in more detail. And then within those project requests, each department also prioritize their highest needed projects. That list is then consolidated at the finance level and prepared for a capital project review committee meeting to discuss the overall list and what can actually be funded in that given year. Each committee responsible discussing their prioritized list, and then the overall committee comes up with the final prioritization. Any projects with safety or operational needs are priority 1, and all those were able to be funded this year. Before the list is finalized, the overall project list is also subject to an analysis based on social equity principles, and there was no disproportionate impact found to low-income or minority populations. So over the next 5 years, the total project need is $1.3 billion. And we summarize it by category in the table to the right. We have about $350 million in bus revenue vehicles, about $68 million in rail revenue vehicles, $81 million in facility and construction projects, $373 million in rail infrastructure, and $62 million in other equipment installation. Those 5 categories are what we consider our stated good repair type projects. That makes up $933 million alone, or 71% of that $1.3 billion. And of that, revenue vehicles, again, is a large chunk of that by itself. And then we have other initiatives which are not stated good repair related. Most of that money, it's $388 million in that 5-year program. Most of it is related to zero emission bus charging infrastructure at all 5 of our bus facilities. It also includes the Clean Transit Advancement Campus, which is our new bus maintenance facility that we're proposing that will help us with our transition to battery electric buses. And there's also a couple other initiatives included in the out years of the CIP. One is the Imperial Avenue Transit Center expansion, and then a future Southwestern Rapid. So of that $1.3 billion, again, we're only able to fund $243 million for the current fiscal year. There was $313 million overall in total requests for fiscal year 25. 74 total projects. We're able to fund 78% of that and fund 64 projects. And you can see the breakdown in the chart on the right. Almost $80 million goes towards revenue vehicles. And then we have $21 million towards facility and construction projects, $69 million towards rail infrastructure, $20 million towards other equipment installations. And then other initiatives were able to fund $53 million in this proposed CIP. So all the projects are listed in attachment B, and there's also descriptions in attachment C. For the rest of the presentation, we'll sort of stick at this category level and just sort of talk about what each of those categories means and how much is being funded in each one of them. I'll start with bus revenue vehicles. So we do have a fleet plan that goes out 20 years as well, that looks at the age of the buses and when they need to be replaced. We try to keep that fleet plan as level as possible, especially on the 40-foot bus side when we have over almost 500 buses there. We try to make it an even amount every year that we're replacing on the 40-foot bus side. It's harder to do that on the 60-foot bus side because you have smaller orders that aren't as frequent. But you can see in total on the chart on the bottom left, we have 768 total buses in the fleet, majority of which are 40-foot. We are transitioning to battery electric buses on the 40-foot and 60-foot fleet. So you can see that we have 25 total so far between those two. And the chart also tells you how the cost difference between a natural gas bus and a battery electric bus, because the battery electric buses are fairly new to the marketplace and they are much more expensive than our regular buses. So for this next fiscal year, we are proposing to spend $58.3 million towards bus replacement. Again, we try to smooth this out because it is the largest thing we fund every single year. And you can see in the chart below, we are proposing $348 million over 5 years is what the need is. And it's about $60 million a year for the first 3 years. And then starting in FY28, half of our purchases are required to be battery electric buses. So you see the funding levels will have to increase then with the more expensive buses. So again, $58.3 million requested. We'll be purchasing 38 40-foot buses, 10 of which will be battery electric. Our rail revenue vehicle fleet, these vehicles last a lot longer, but they're also more expensive. So we have 168 vehicles in the fleet. These have a 25 to 30 useful life. We basically replace these as these, we start planning for these as they come up on their end of the useful life. So you can see we have 11 of the 3000 series. Those will be ready to replace in starting in 2029. And then all these other ones, you can see 65s we got in 2011, 2013. The 5000 series we started getting in 2019. That's the SD100 replacements, which are still funding today. So we started planning for SD100 replacements back in 2018. We placed the first order in 2019 for 25. We had received all of those 25, and then we exercise, an option for the next 22 in fiscal year 2021. So those remaining 22 are still being delivered at now through this year and next year. So we're still finalizing this plan. It was $260 million in total. We still have to fund another $21 million in FY25, another $5 million in FY26 before we'll finally replace all the SD100 fleet. Once that is done, we basically need to start saving for the next batch. The 3000 series will need to be replaced, the SD7, so we'll start saving for that in fiscal year 26. So again, we're requesting $21 million towards the SD100 replacements in this CIP. The next category is facility and construction projects. This covers all of our bus maintenance divisions and our trolley maintenance division as well. It also covers all of our passenger facilities, not only the trolley transit centers, but also the major bus transit centers as well. And it includes things such as shelters, benches, parking lots, and elevators as well. So there's a lot of stuff within this category, a lot of projects. Overall, 21 projects were submitted between bus facility projects, rail facility projects, and passenger facility projects. We're able to fund 18 of those, and 3 were not able to be funded this current fiscal year. So we're funding a total of 21.3 between those 3 categories, and the 5-year need is $81.4 million in that category. The next category is rail infrastructure projects. Takes a large capital investment to build a rail system, as we saw with the Mid-Coast Edition a couple years ago. So we have over $5 billion in total system assets on the rail side now. So it does require significant upkeep every year. And the pictures on the right sort of give you an example of the type of upkeep we're talking about. This is a rail crossing where the road meets a trolley track. And over time, there's just general wear and tear on that crossing that makes it more bumpy for both the drivers and also the riders on the trolley. So we have to go through it and upkeep that every so often. You can see the before and after pictures of the difference that makes when you actually do that project. We do have some more of those projects this year. We sort of break the rail infrastructure projects into 2 pieces. Pieces that are directly related to the physical rail or on the track side. So that's the rails and the ties and any special track work like crossovers and things of that effect. And also the grade crossings, which is what's pictured. The second piece of that is the maintenance of wayside stuff. And that's the bridges and elevated track. It's the drainage around the track that keeps the track in place. And it's also the electrification of everything, not only the trolleys, but the signaling as well. So for those 2 categories, we're funding a total of $69.5 million. $56.6 million is on the track side, and that is largely the Orange Line improvement projects being funded by TRCP and SB 125. And then there's also another $13 million funded on the infrastructure side for things like substation replacement, which is what the picture is depicting. So 18 projects in total of this category. 14 were able to be funded this fiscal year. 4 will be able to fund it, and they'll be funded in future fiscal years. Look, over this 5-year period, again, it's $373 million of these type of projects that need to be done just in the state of good repair. We also have a category called other equipment installation, sort of a catch-all of everything else. Mainly it's equipment on the operations side, the service vehicles or maintenance or cleaning equipment type things. It also includes all of the IT infrastructure that we have, not only from a system perspective, but also the hardware perspective and the network side. So in this one, there were 21 projects total submitted. We're able to fund 19 of them, and 2 were not able to be funded. It's a total of about $20 million in funding, and the 5-year need in this category was $62 million. This next slide rolls up the stated good repair need over the 5-year in this CIP. So again, we're funding $190 million of stated good repair needs. We're unable to fund about $10 million this current fiscal year, and the need over the 5-year period is $933 million. To put that in perspective, that's $187 million per year just in stated good repair upkeep type projects, and our recurring revenue streams over the next 5 years is only forecasted to be $600 million. So we do have a structural deficit there just in trying to balance our stated good repair needs. Next, I want to talk about our other initiatives. This is not stated repair stuff, but other stuff that we need to fund within the capital improvement program. Starts with innovative clean transit infrastructure. We did get some additional funding through Senate Bill 125 for this. So we're able to fund more of these projects this year than we have in the recent past. We're funding almost $39 million of these projects, and it's basically charging infrastructure at every division that we have, existing division, between IAD, KMD, South Bay, East County, and our Copley Park division. So that's basically where the funding is all going, spread across those different divisions. We also had a request for $60 million for the Clean Transit Advancement Campus that we were not able to fund this current fiscal year. We are in the process of purchasing that land for that division. And then once we have that land, we feel we'll be much more competitive on the competitive grant side because we do have the land in place, a site in place. We feel we can get some funding for that through federal programs or other state programs. So we'll be aggressively going after that to fund that project, but we are not funding anything with our existing capital improvement program this current fiscal year. So in total, these needs for just the innovative clean transit infrastructure is $332 million over that 5-year period. And lastly, our other initiatives, we do have 6 projects submitted for FY 2025. We're able to fund 3 of them. It includes the 12th and Imperial Transit Center downstairs. It includes some additional funding towards the Green Line Imperial double track that's also downstairs to finalize that project. And then we're also finalizing an El Cajon Transit Center 3rd track. So in total, we're funding $14 million for these other initiative projects. And the 5-year need is going to be $56 million. So this last slide rolls up expenses and revenues together. So again, we had $1.3 billion in total project requests. $933 million was just stated repair, and $388 million is other initiatives, primarily battery electric bus infrastructure. Over that period, our recurring and non-recurring revenues are projected to be $842 million. On the non-recurring side, we basically just program what we know what we're going to receive. We will be going after a large number of competitive grant programs and earmarks to grow that CIP revenue number. As of right now, we only program what we know that we have been awarded. So that results in a deficit of $479 million. So we are 64% funded for this fiscal year. Before we get to the staff recommendation, just a few takeaways. I mean, we generally always have a challenge in meeting our unconstrained list of projects, and not only from a safety repair side, but any other initiatives that we would like to do. There's just more projects and then funding is available. So to prioritize that, this is how the agency has been operating in the past. The safety repair is the first priority. Keeping the system safe and reliable has always been what gets funded first. We're also looking at climate resiliency, start planning for that. And we had a major flood in late January. We need to start planning ahead and sort of preparing for things like that in the future. And after that, we're trying to do our battery electric bus transition as fast as possible. So we're putting infrastructure at all existing bus facilities. And that's an iterative process where we do one piece of it and then we have to come back and keep expanding until we get the full fleet transition. And to do that battery electric bus transition, we do need another campus to be able to just have the space to have all the construction going on at the same time and operate our normal level of service. And if we want to add go any faster on the battery electric bus, we need that extra campus. And if we want to add any more service, we also need that extra campus. So that's why it's higher in the priorities than acceleration is. And as always, we continue to be aggressive with granting processes, any competitive program, both federal and state level, and then also earmark opportunities to help fund that gap. So that brings me to the staff recommendation, is that the MTS Board of Directors approve the fiscal year 2025 capital improvement program with the estimated federal and non-federal funding levels, which were attachments A and B. As the federal appropriation figures are finalized and or other project funding sources become available, allow the CEO to identify and adjust projects for the adjusted funding levels. And two, recommend that the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG Board of Directors approve the submittal of our federal sections 5307, 5337, and 5339 applications for the FY25 CIP, and then also recommend that SANDAG Board of Directors approve amendment number 12 of the 2023 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP, in accordance with this CIP. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. The original DRA. Please unmute yourself now.
Yes, so as we sit here and we talk about the zero emission buses and all of the things and the billions of dollars that you're going to be spending on this, you're not ever acknowledging the fact that, not only are they lithium bombs that we're putting people into and the radiation that comes off of these charging stations, let alone just the bus itself or any vehicle that you are riding in, it's radiating and microwaving you from the inside out. And when there's like just having them be able to travel as far as they need to, they can't go as far as a gas powered or other powered bus, and depending on whether it's hot or cold, it affects how far it can actually go and the battery life of it. In addition, just the weight of these increase for this type of technology is it's significantly going to be affecting the roads and damaging them at a higher rate than just like a normal bus. And when you want to, what was I going to say? Shoot. But just like the fact that they're combustible, and it's in order to make them, it takes gas and oil to produce this type of technology. So you can never get away and go to zero emissions when all the things that you're bringing forward for infrastructure and whatnot to be using for
30
transit,
seconds left.
it's going to still need all of that stuff. Like you can't get any of these products without using gas and oil. So for you to think that you're going and stepping outside of this, you're still engaging in the same thing. You're just, pretending that it's being made by something else. So, I mean, we need to be honest with the people here. You're never going to go to zero emission. And this is a really bad idea if you want to get people going anywhere, because it's going to keep them from being able to travel as much as possible. But that's the plan. You guys
Your
want
time
people
has
enslaved.
expired. That concludes public comment. Oh, sorry, Chair. There's one more person in the queue. Blair Beekman, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Thanks for the words of original DRA previously. It seems that there is a bit of a debate going on at this time about the future of electric vehicle use and its safety features. Good luck in what you have to be considering at this time. There's questions you have to consider and balance. Hydrogen fuel cell buses. I know in Alameda County, they use AC Transit. That they started that program a few years ago that they were very proud of. That it may be a system that is worth considering, I suppose. I don't know. I know it's a heavier bus. It makes for it hurts the pavement more. Electric buses is obviously a better option, but we have to talk about the safety features more, and we have to be. I hope as elected officials, you can learn to share with the public ways and practices to when these new fire flare-ups from electric vehicle use come up, that we have ways to put it out, that we have ways to you can be safe from that happening. We have to learn how to more openly talk about that, and we're trying right now. Good luck in those continued efforts and what you have to be deciding about the future of bus use and pavement use. I'm interested in how pavement use doesn't necessarily have to be concrete, but perhaps more flexible ideas of rubber and silicone, concepts like that, really innovative ideas of the future of pavement, not just concrete. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. We'll now open board discussion on this item. We'll begin with Vice Chair Goebel and then go to Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike, for a great presentation. Very thorough, Eric. Thank you. Let's go back to slide 18, please. I have a question on overhead charging versus delivery of electric buses. So we can see in the upcoming fiscal year, we're going to be funding and essentially completing, I guess, Kearney Mesa, Imperial, Copley Park, and then following year is going to be East County and South Bay. So in the next 2 years, it looks like we're going to finish the electrical charging structure. And this may not necessarily be a finance question, so I can look to anybody else who can answer. My question is, if we finish those charging structures, are the buses ready to be delivered? Are we having any supply chain problems with battery electric buses being delivered?
Well, I want to clarify that we're not finishing, we're basically starting. So you can
Okay.
see the picture on the right, that is one section of South Bay. It charges 24 buses. And so we have to do that 9 more times at South Bay. So,
Okay.
and I mean, we're funding it this fiscal year. It won't be completed for the next maybe a year and a half or so. And then buses will start arriving in higher numbers in 26 and 27. So it's an iterative process where you're building pieces at a time and then bringing buses in. We don't see any supply chain issues with the battery electric buses so far, but we haven't been ordering them in very large amounts yet. Does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
It does. Thank you. The key is we don't want to be having a infrastructure sitting there with no buses
Right.
because it's hard to get them delivered because of manufacturing issues. So my point is, let's be aware that communicate to the board if there's any interruptions in delivery of those buses, because the useful life of that charging structure starts when it's completed. And if there's not a bus there, not a bus, but if there's not all the buses there, then the useful life of that charging structure is not being maximized because the delivery of the buses were delayed somehow. So
Okay.
as long as we're on top of the supply chain of buses to match the structure as it's built, that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm really glad to see that we were able to receive additional funding for the CIP. And I know that it's a very crucial time for us as we look forward to meeting our climate action goals. And I just want to shout out the Orange Line, of course, and the improvements there, in addition to the Clean Transportation Advancement Campus. Also want to thank the grants administration team for gathering letters of support and in addition to writing letters of support that we submitted to the state and federal government. I do have one question. I want to kind of bring in some of the feedback that we received from the social equity listening tour, especially on some of the smaller projects. So when I look at this, I don't necessarily see that anything that or feedback that came from that tour wasn't included here. I think there were quite a few things that were included, but I don't necessarily see it called out. So I would like to kind of have that as a component of our reporting, just to see, how we're following up with that feedback, incorporating it into our decision-making process with regard to the CIP. I don't know if you have any feedback on how we're tracking those components of the listening tour.
As for the project status, I don't have feedback on that, but we programmed a total of $5 million towards those social equity projects over the last 2 fiscal years in 23 and 24. We programmed some of it in middle part of last calendar year, and those projects are underway and gone through procurement, everything to that effect. We also still have about $2 million approximately that hasn't been programmed, that's still going to be planned. It's been funded in the CIP, but it hasn't been given directly to projects from that social equity working group. So that part is in process as well.
Okay.
And if
All
I
right.
could, I think
Yes.
that's actually a really great idea, is to, when we present on the CIP, that we actually include a footnote to say this is consistent with our SELT findings or our report. And that way we can call it out, like the Buyer Boulevard project, beautification project has components of that SELT program, as well as the San Isidro intermodal center. Just to bring a couple up to the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good for us and it's good for the public and the people that participate, to know that we're not just kind of checking off a list to talk to them, but we're taking some of that input and putting it back to our system. So I would love to see that. But thank you for all the hard work. I think we need a motion on, so I'll move this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Steppe. I'll be happy to second the motion. Seeing no further discussion on this item, clerk, please call the roll.
Gonzalez,
I vote yes.
McCann is,
Yes.
McCann is absent. Donovan,
Yes.
Montgomery Steppe,
Yes.
Goble,
Yes.
Leyva Gonzalez,
Yes.
Dillard,
Yes.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Moreno,
Moreno, yes.
Elo Rivera is absent. Campillo,
Yes.
Whitburn,
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you, clerk. All right, that brings us to item 21, which is a hearing on proposed actions related to the 12th and Imperial Transit Center Rehabilitation Project. And Ms. Landers is going to provide this presentation when she gets up to the front. And please proceed whenever you're settled in and ready to begin your presentation.
Great, thank you. So you all know me, I'm Karen Landers, General Counsel. I have with me Scott Noya, who is our outside counsel in this matter. I'm going to give the presentation and then we're both available for questions. Oop, in the wrong direction. Okay. So this is a pretty interesting case. It is a resolution necessity hearing, which authorizes MTS to acquire property interest using eminent domain, which does require a 2/3 vote of the board, which means I need 10 votes today. And there are specific findings for the board to be made, but this is not your typical eminent domain hearing. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the unique interest that MTS is trying to clear title to. First, the findings that the board is required to make whenever it adopts a resolution of necessity are these 4 ones. The first is that the public interest and necessity require the project. The second is that project has been planned or located in a manner that will be the most compatible with the greatest public good and the least private injury. Next is that the interest in the property that we're seeking to acquire are necessary for that project. And then finally, that we have complied with these statutory requirements to make offers to acquire the property from the owners. And so I'm going to walk you through each of those findings in this case. So the first is the public interest and necessity requiring the project. The project that we're here to talk about today is the 12th Imperial Transit Center Rehabilitation Project. It's one that we've brought to the board over the last 2 years. We actually have a TIRCP grant of almost $11 million that we received, which is going to allow us to reconfigure and expand the bus transit center here at 12th and Imperial. And it's really needed. And so what it is going to do is it will increase our bus bays downstairs from just 4 to 10 to 13. It will add a new orange line platform on Commercial Street that we can use for special events or other operations. It'll improve the passenger waiting areas with shelters, benches, and lighting, improve better circulation between Imperial Street and 14th Street with our buses. And we're also hoping to be able to reduce some of the flooding impacts to our transit services by adding some detention basins and drainage improvements. Whenever there's heavy rain, even in addition to the crazy flooding we had on January 22nd, just normal heavy rain, our tracks downstairs will flood. And you'll see our operations and maintenance employees out there, trying to put sandbags in and sweep water off the tracks. And then we're just hoping that this will have a better configuration for current service levels, which will give us room to add additional service as well. So just a sense of what the project is, the figure on the left is the current configuration where we have 4 official bus bays and then other buses that are down here at 12th and Imperial, which is our major transit center. It's where all 3 trolley lines intersect. And we are staging buses on 13th Street and National Avenue and 14th Street. And it's just really not the ideal environment for a state-of-the-art central major transit center. And so we want to provide a better environment for both our buses and operations and for our passengers. And so right now, the draft concept design is what you see on your right, which would add additional bays. And essentially what we want to do is kind of relocate 13th and National further down onto property that MTS owns, and make that bus only lanes. Emergency vehicles could still use it. And then that would require some modifications to where then those buses intersect at 14th Street and Imperial. So the next finding is that the project is planned in a manner that will be the most compatible with the greatest public good and the least private injury. So this is another map that just shows those triangle parcels and the transit center on the left. Those are all property that's owned by MTS. And then we have a right by statute to use every public street and every grant of public street, throughout the region. And so one of the things is that the realignment of National Avenue and a portion of 13th Street is going to improve the traffic flow, because we're going to have to reconfigure where those buses intersect with Imperial and with 14th Street. And if we left existing National Avenue in place, that would be very unsafe, very inefficient design and conflicts of interaction. And then currently, I'm going to go into what the property rights are that we're trying to acquire. But as I'll explain later, the heirs of Murdoch and Clark don't have a current use or right to use those streets. So there's no huge private injury here by asking to clear title to those reversionary fee rights, which I'm going to walk you through. So the next finding is that the interest in the property acquired is necessary for the project. And so one of the things that we would do so that we can reconfigure how these streets intersect and are used is we would go through the process at the city to vacate the streets in National Avenue and 13th Street. And so the interest that we're looking at is in green are the heirs of Elizabeth Murdoch, who I'll walk you through, and in yellow are the heirs of Charles and Frances Clark. And so because of the nature of the project, the safest and most efficient design is to vacate the street and move slightly how the street interacts in that area. And so we do need to acquire this reversionary fee interest, to get clear title to the vacated street sections. So what are the property interests that we're going to acquire here? It's called the reversionary fee interest in a public street. And this takes us back to 1905 when the city of San Diego purchased outright from Elizabeth Murdoch and from Charles and Frances Clark the property that's kind of within those blue lines in order to build National Avenue. And just to take you back even further, in 1871, the Horton's edition map was created and filed, and the subdivision of downtown was created. And that has all of downtown was divided into street sections and blocks, and it was linear. And so each block had a number, and then there were individual lots within that. And so what this did is it carved out a diagonal line across some of those blocks to create this National Avenue street. So then that takes us to the question of who is it that actually owns the underlying fee interest in a street? And there's generally three options. The most common answer, and especially under that Horton's edition map, when it's a grid, is that the adjacent or abutting property owner owns to the center line of the street. So that would mean in this case, since MTS owns the property around it, we would own to the center line of National Avenue on each side of that parcel. Another option in certain cases is it's the city or the county who owns the street. So in this situation, the city acquired by deed, the property from Murdoch and Clark, and so city would be the one who owned that street. And then the final potential answer is that the original grantor, when the street was created, owns that reversionary fee interest. And so in this case, because the deed was in 1905, and so we reliably presumed and have confirmed that Ms. Murdoch and Mr. and Mrs. Clark are deceased, it would be their heirs that would own that reversionary fee interest. So we went through a process of getting a title report from the city or from a title company. The first report we got told us the city owns this, because they acquired by meets and bounds and they have this deed, this is a city-owned reversionary fee interest. But we took that to the city to say, we'd like to talk to you about this project. And the city said, no, we don't own that. We only own streets as easements. So regardless of what the deed said, we're not the owner. So we took that information back to the title company, and the title company then decided that it was the heirs of Murdoch and Clark who own this because the property was carved out by meets and bounds, and so that normal rule of the adjacent owner owning the reversionary fee doesn't apply. So that's how we got here to say that there is a viable argument that the heirs of Murdoch and Clark own this fee interest. I wouldn't recommend that MTS try to litigate that no, as the budding owner, the title company's wrong. We just want to do what's right and clear the title. So the next thing that we needed to do is have to make offers to acquire the property rights from the owners of that right. And because they're entitled to just compensation for those interests. And so the steps for an agency are appraise the property interest, identify the reversionary fee interest potential owners, make a written offer to purchase, and then provide the resolution necessity hearing notice and a right to speak here to you today. And so we did that by first starting and getting a appraisal from a local appraiser, Bill Anderson. He looked at it, and the value of that reversionary fee interest is so remote that the conclusion was it had nominal value. When something has nominal value, an appraiser generally just assigns a $2,500 value. And so that's what for each group of heirs. So the group of Clark heirs, collectively that interest is worth $2,500. The group of Murdoch heirs, collectively that interest is worth $2,500. And that is primarily because the primary value for the property was paid to the original owners back when they sold it to the city in 1905. And so their heirs already received that value. And so this remote interest that it may someday not be a street and go back to them is considered of nominal value. So then how do you find the heirs of original grantors from 1905? We ultimately decided through Scott's firm that we would hire a private investigator that specialized in genealogy and descendant tracing to try to find these heirs. And so through that process, we created a family tree, and we made offers to who had been identified as potential next in line descendants of Ms. Murdoch and Mr. and Mrs. Clark. We sent those out. We got some information from family members that had to correct some of the information that we got from the private investigator, that certain people that had been identified as deceased were actually alive, which meant you kind of step up. Their parents actually owned the interest, not all of their children. So we adjusted our offers and sent out new notices and offers to the people who actually had the rights. And so we sent them notices between February 2nd and the 22nd of both the offer and that we intended to come to the board for a resolution necessity hearing. And our negotiations with those heirs are in various stages. We actually have pending agreements with the Murdoch heirs to completely acquire their rights. And then the Clark heirs, we had 11 identified heirs, and we've reached agreement with 7 of them. And then 4, either we're waiting to hear from them, or one is still considering and wants to understand a little bit more. But one of the questions is, like, why do we need eminent domain if we couldn't just go out and negotiate with them? Like, even if we're able to negotiate with every single one of the heirs that we've identified, we still need to file an eminent domain action to clear title from potential unknown heirs. I mean, these are heirs from 1905 on. We don't know if we've missed someone. We don't know if somebody excommunicated and basically disinherited all of their living descendants and instead gave it to somebody else. And so in order to make sure that we have clear title, we need to go through this process with the court. And then we also, as part of that, would want the court to determine that we made reasonable and diligent efforts to identify those heirs. So with that, we are requesting that the board approve this resolution necessity, which includes the findings that I just walked you through, and then authorize us to take action to complete the negotiations, file condemnation proceedings, and acquire the interests that are necessary for public street right away. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms.
That
Landers.
might be the strangest item we'll bring to you.
Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. The original DRA, please unmute yourself now.
Of course, Stephen, come on. Yeah, so what you guys, I mean, it's sad to see that this kind of stuff can take place because you'll put some value on something, say, oh, it has nominal value. It doesn't mean just because of the, monetary value of it is low doesn't mean that there isn't a significance to keep the land for a family member or whatnot. And of course we need, transit and different things, but I mean, the way that you guys are pushing stuff and pushing, this whole agenda to, enslave us in a 15-minute smart city and not have us drive anywhere but walk and bike, this is going to be happening more, and you're going to be continuing to take up the land that belongs to the people and doing things that, I mean, are set out to potentially help, but not when you're bringing in zero emissions, because that's total propaganda. You're putting more people in danger by, doing this whole agenda that you guys are doing. And it's just sad to think that you can come in and put at such a low value because you don't think, or, you're claiming you've already given, them the value in 1905. But, how many more times are we going to have this eminent domain be taking place when you're just going to be saying, well, this is to provide something for the public and it's going to benefit the public, and be for public good. Because as long as you say that, then you can come in and basically take over all of the land from the people and put us where you need us to be. And, people want to think that I'm crazy for saying that, and I don't really care because I'll say it until
30
the cows
seconds
go
left.
home, because you guys are also going to be enslaved with that. They're just puppeting you guys around in order to push this agenda. But, the more and more property that you take from the people and say that it has no value and whatnot, that just gets really dangerous, because you're going to start, pissing the people off pretty bad when you start taking all of their land, saying that it's going to be doing something that's good, and you're literally putting them in danger by radiating them with whatever you're bringing in, because there's going to be these charging
Your time has
stations.
expired. That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. We will now open board discussion on this item, and we'll begin with Director Hall.
Okay, sorry to sound confused here, but from what you're saying is the city bought the property,
Yes.
but we're paying people that don't own the property.
We tried to talk to the city about negotiating with them because the title report said they owned it. But the city cited this old statute from, I think, 1965 that says regardless of how the city takes title to property that it acquires for a street, that it actually takes it as an easement. So the title company then went back and decided that this was these weird situations because of how the street was created, that it severed it. And so this remote interest is still owned by the original grantors.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the city of San Diego is not gonna come in after we pay these guys off and say, well, we own the property, not them.
Correct.
Not that
Yes.
I'm downing any city council members here, but I just want to make sure that we're, that we're not gonna, if it was me, I'd be saying, write me a check too at that point. So we won't have that problem.
We will not have that problem. We originally had a title report that said that the city owned it, and the city said this title report is wrong. Go give this information to the title company.
Okay,
So,
I'll make a motion to approve it.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Director Hall. Director Donovan.
Thank you, Chair. I think that was a good question from Mr. Hall. Just to follow up, do we need any kind of a release from the city of San Diego, or are they willing to give us something in writing that they're not going to come back and say, oh, we made a mistake and we do actually own the property? How does that going to work?
So we have talked to the city. The city is very supportive of our project, and has supported, and written letters of support of the grant that we got. I'm certainly happy to circle back with them. We have to go through the street vacation process with the city. So ultimately, the vacation of the street will come to the city council to approve as a separate matter. We just wanted to make sure that when we do that, the title to the street comes back to MTS. And so, we will tick all of those boxes, but we already had extensive discussions with the city where they said, don't talk to us, we don't own it. So.
Okay. Yeah, I would just encourage us to make sure we have a closing there, that there's no opening that they could come back in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion from Director Hall. I will be happy to second the motion. Director Gonzalez.
I was getting ready to vote on this since I'm fighting with the microphone, but I will make the point that the quiet title process in the court will put an end to that conversation. So just as long as the city doesn't raise an objection during that process, it will be closed and the rights to bring up the issue of ownership will be moot after that point.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Gonzalez,
I vote yes.
McCann is absent. Donovan,
Yes.
Montgomery Stepp,
Yes.
Goble,
Yes.
Leyva Gonzalez,
Yes.
Dillard,
Yes.
Mendoza, Bush,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Moreno,
Moreno, yes.
Elo Rivera is absent. Campillo,
Yes.
Whitburn, Hall.
Yes.
The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Item number 22 is a fiscal year 2024 mid-year performance monitoring report. This one is an informational item, and we'll invite Dennis Desmond and Naomi Woods to present this item.
Good morning, Dennis Desmond, Director of Planning and Scheduling. I'm joined by Naomi Woods. She's our Senior Data Analyst. I get to do all the talking today, but Naomi is actually the brains behind all of the data in the report here. So MTS Board Policy 42 requires that we bring evaluation of our services to the board on a periodic basis. There are 20 different metrics that are in the policy for us to measure and bring to you. Those are all listed here. They are all in the attachment to the agenda item. And today I'm just going to talk about a few of the metrics of interest. And the first of those is, of course, ridership. Our ridership for the first 6 months of fiscal year 24, which is the period of time that this report covers, we had an average daily ridership of 238,000. Going back to pre-pandemic fiscal year 2020, the first 6 months was 283,000 average. So we're working our way back up there, not quite there yet. Fiscal year 22 is down to 169,000, 215 the next year, now up to 238,000. So we're going up a little bit each year. We are still struggling in a few areas. Among those are commuter services. Those routes are still down about 60%. We are operating a lower level of service, but that ridership is still down much more than our other services. One of our commuter services, the Sereno Valley Coaster Connection, because that ridership is not recovered, we brought a public hearing to this board in fall of last year where it was approved to discontinue those services in June of 2024, although North County Transit District will be resuming some of those services, assuming those from us. For the rest of the year, again, ridership continues to rebound. Our monthly year-over-year ridership is still increasing 10 to 15%, which in ordinary times would be an astounding number. Usually we look at about 3% per year growth. So even at 10%, we're still doing pretty well, and it indicates that we haven't reached our full potential of recovery from the pandemic yet. We did reduce some services in 2022 due to driver shortages. We've been restoring those since September of 2023. We'll continue restoring those over the next year. We implemented our Iris Rapid 227 route in October of last year, so that's provided us a boost in ridership. And then in June of 2024, we'll increase night and weekend service on the trolley, as well as restore some more of the bus services. For our total passengers, for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, we carried 37.7 million riders. That compares to fiscal year 2019, which was the last full fiscal year before the pandemic, where we carried 43.2 million passengers in the first 6 months. So again, we're still working back up that way, but from where we were even 2 years ago, down in the 7 million range, we're actually doing pretty well. Our growth in the overall passengers from 6 months last year to 6 months this year was about 9.5%. Our average weekday ridership was 238,000, which was a 10.5% increase over last year, where we had 215,000 average weekday riders. The chart on this screen shows the growth in average weekday ridership. All of these numbers are in thousands. So you can see on the far right, the FY24, and I apologize, apologize, these numbers are very small, but the FY '24 average, again, 238,000. And this comes actually from the lowest point of the pandemic in April of 2020, when we had an average of 83,000 riders. Again, the first 6 months of FY 2020, we were at 283,000. So we're still working back up towards that. This chart is a little complicated because we've overlaid a lot of different years on it. But the chart at the top shows the system-wide monthly ridership. So the blue bars in the background are FY 19. That's again the last full year, full fiscal year before the pandemic started. The red bars that you see up at the top, that was fiscal year 2020. We were actually having a banner year. We were going to have very good ridership in FY 20. You can see those are all above FY 19 for the most part. And then we, of course, hit March 2020 and everything really crashed at that point. So moving on to the next year, FY 2021 is the green, and we moved up a little bit, got up to just under 4 million riders a month. Then moving on to the purple, increased all the way up. And FY 22 is really when schools started coming back in session, and we started really seeing growth, and we got up to almost 6 million riders a month in FY 22. And then moving on to the orange, back up over 6 million for the most part, except in the June when we had some driver strikes that impacted our ridership in June of last year. Now we're in the pink, and again, we're above 6, almost hitting 7 million passengers per month in some months. So again, still clawing our way back up. The chart at the bottom shows the year-over-year increase for monthly basis. And as you can see, FY 20 to 21, we were in the red. That was really the heart of the pandemic. And it wasn't until April of 2021 when we started coming out of that. Since then, we've essentially increased our ridership year-over-year basis every single month since then, with the exception of last June when we had the driver strike. We do anticipate the ridership in January and February this year will be lower because of the floods and the very heavy rains that we experience. So that typically dampens ridership, so to speak. So these numbers may come down in the first 2 months of 2024. One of our most important metrics that we look at for efficiency and productivity is our passengers per revenue hour. These are the number of boardings we have on our services for each hour of service that we put out there on the street or rails. So we still have some growth to do here to get back to pre-pandemic. System-wide, we're at 37 passengers per hour. In this 6 months, we were at 34 passengers per hour. So that's pretty good, a 7% increase over last year. So this is just like ridership, it's increasing not to where we were pre-pandemic, but it is increasing year over year still. On-time performance is one of our, service quality metrics. And we have a goal of 85% on time for most of our services, and then 90% for some of our highway and rail services. So the services that typically use either highways or guideways are meeting their goals, whereas the services that are primarily operating on surface streets are still below their goals. That being said, we're still above 80%. We're in the 80 to 85% on most of these services. They aren't quite to the 85%, but this is actually better than pre-pandemic when we saw a lot of these results in the 60s and 70%. So there's a lot of improvement here, even if we haven't gotten quite to our goal. So with that, again, the full report is an attachment to the agenda item, but I'm happy to answer any questions or comments on the report or on the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond and Ms. Woods. Clerk, do we have any public comment?
You do, the original DRA. Please unmute yourself now.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up again the fact that we have, a bunch of hundreds of men and women being dropped off at the transit centers that have just come from DHS. And they are taking their charter buses to the Old Town trolley and then and sometimes they actually take the other transit from there. That's not just the airport shuttle that they're taking, but, it's going to skew your numbers especially for, February and March, because, that's when it was really starting to happen again, because the migrant center closed down because we ran out of money, even though this still continues outside of that. Yeah, remember, Stephen, you saw me there. I mean, I saw you and you didn't even want to acknowledge it. But, with the amount of passengers that are riding this, it's going to seem like it's an increase in passengers and that, more people are riding it, but it's not. It's these illegals that are being dropped off at that center to go and then ride it. So, and we're fitting the bill for that. And, when you're sitting here and you want to increase the travel and whatnot, I mean, still you really don't have an increase in passengers on like the community level, but it's through these people that are coming in. So, if you're going to sit here and act like the people are riding it more, that's not necessarily true. And the fact that you have those people at these transit centers when children can ride
30
for
seconds
free,
left.
it actually puts them in danger. And other people, when you don't even have the security or any kind of, whatever to make sure that these people are safe. And I'm not saying that all of these people have like a, something that they're going to do to the people, but they're already trashing these stations. And if children are riding, we need to be mindful of that and what that can potentially cause, because there are people across the United States who have been killed by people that are crossing our border, and we're sending them elsewhere
Your
to go
time
do
has
that.
expired. Blair Beekman, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for this item. Thanks a lot for the explanations of, pre and post-COVID ridership issues. It was nice to hear today and to get a sense of that. And yeah, I always need to be reminded of kind of ridership issues pre and post-COVID. And I'm a really firm, strong believer in public transit. I was really hurt by the overall concepts of COVID. I am in the camp that believes that it was, kind of created for a specific purpose. And in that, it had the specific purpose to really limit, the future of public transportation for a while across the world, basically. I don't know why that happened. I don't know what sort of thinking would allow that to happen. And we're trying to build back ridership again. I don't know the intentions of trying to limit public transportation for ourselves. It's been sad. Good luck how you can rebuild. I mentioned earlier in my non-agenda public comment the ideas of more bus service within an hour for each stop. That's a way to build an accessibility to bus service. It does use more gas.
30 seconds
And
left.
thank you. And I've been contemplating that issue, but it's, I think, a very good system to invite accessibility. Good luck in measures to keep working towards better ridership for ourselves, and that we're open about its good purpose and it can be safe. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. This was an informational item, so no motion is needed. We will now open board discussion on this item with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Nice presentation. Could we go back to slide 6, please? It's pretty clear every year that January is the slowest or least ridden month, and October seems to be the peak. What could you tell us about the seasonality of this business? Is it tourism driven? For instance, if it is, then I assume the workers who support tourism peak in high convention months, or what could you tell us about seasonality?
There's definitely a seasonality, and it's really primarily driven by school schedules, especially colleges and universities. So October and March are traditionally our largest months because they have 31 days each and they don't have any holidays in them. So once you get into November, December, you get into holidays. January has 31 days, but it's got a couple of holidays and schools don't all come back until the end of the month. So it's definitely seasonal, and you get into summer and you don't have school. So those tend to be a little bit lower, although you do make up for a little bit of that with some of the visitor traffic.
Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Seeing no further discussion, this was an informational item, and we'll thank you both again for the presentation. We'll move on to our final presentation of the morning, and that is item 23, and that is vehicle assignment and transit amenities policies, another informational item. And we'll invite Samantha Leslie and Dennis Desmond to present this item.
Good morning, Dennis Desmond, Director of Planning and Scheduling. I'm joined on this item by Samantha Leslie, our staff attorney, who handles many of our Title VI issues. So this item is talking about two policies, administrative policies that are required by the FTA for compliance with Title VI. And we talk about Title VI a lot, so I want to step back just a moment and talk about what that is. When we talk about Title VI, it's Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's one of 11 titles in the Civil Rights Act. Those other titles address issues such as voter rights and desegregation. But Title VI specifically refers to federally funded programs and activities. So what Title VI of the Civil Rights Act says is that it provides that no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. MTS is one of those programs that receives federal financial assistance. So like all other recipients of FTA funds, we receive guidance from the FTA on how to comply with Title VI. FTA issues that guidance through circulars. The most recent circular that gave guidance on Title VI compliance is Circular 4702.1B, which was issued in 2012. It included a requirement for two administrative policies. One is vehicle assignment and the other is distribution of transit amenities. These policies are required to be monitored at least every 3 years and to be brought to the Board of Directors for approval. Those are also submitted to the FTA as part of our triennial Title VI program update, which will be coming to the board in May of 2024. The last time these policies were brought to the board for approval of the monitoring report was in July of 2021. At that time, there was board interest in reviewing these policies prior to the next monitoring report, which we anticipate bringing to you in July of 2024. Delving a little bit into the policies themselves, the vehicle assignment policy deals with our revenue vehicles, our buses and our light rail vehicles, our LRVs. It has a description of each bus and LRV type. There are charts of the amenities on each bus type and LRV type. We talk about the bus assignments by route. Obviously, capacity is one of those, everything from 60-foot articulated buses down to small minivans that we use on our ADA services. Also assigned by route type. LRV assignments are by line. How we assign those by line. There are some differences in the various generations of LRVs that we use. And then the route assignments by division and vehicle assignments by division, and that's on the bus side. We only have one light rail division. And how we assign our ADA paratransit vehicles. And new to the vehicle assignment policy, it is a discussion of zero emission buses. And then there's a fleet list for both the buses and the LRVs. The transit amenities policy or distribution of transit amenities policy has several categories that are discussed. These are seating, shelters, information displays, both static and electronic, elevators and escalators, trash and recycling receptacles, restrooms, ticket vending machines, and fare validators. Amenities among trolley stations are primarily standardized through the 63 stations in the trolley system. It says 62, there are 63 trolley stations in the system. We use elevators only at stations where we need to bridge 2 different levels. We only have escalators at the SDSU stations. But there are primarily standardized with those few exceptions. We do have MTS provided restrooms at selected transit centers. However, on the bus side, we have 4,500 bus stops. About 3,500 of those are within the city of San Diego. And there is a wide variation of amenities among those bus stops. Traditionally, we've prioritized those amenities by boardings. In other words, the number of people that are boarding at each of those stops will dictate the level of amenities that are provided. In 2021, we did add an equity component to consider disadvantaged communities. We are authorized to add shelters and benches in some of our jurisdictions, but not all of them. Some of our cities install their own shelters and benches, and some of them have an agreement with us that our contractor installs the shelters and benches. In other cases, benches and shelters are installed by others, whether it's the cities, other cities, or business improvement districts, developers, homeowners associations, et cetera, that are adjacent to those bus stops. In some cases, infrastructure at the stop is unable to accommodate our shelters or benches because of constraints such as narrow sidewalks, missing sidewalks, the right-of-way just isn't wide enough. The condition of the sidewalk is insufficient for us to be able to bolt down our amenities. However, to that end, we do have a CIP project that upgrades locations. Our priority here has been ADA accessibility and in disadvantaged communities. So that you'll see that come up for funding as we go through the CIP process in various years. We currently have 9 stops, all of them in the city of San Diego, that are in the permitting process right now, and we'll continue to do a few of those each year. So a few of the current initiatives in terms of transit amenities that we're going through. We have a procurement underway right now for additional bus shelters. So the current contract, or the contract that we have that provided all of our current bus shelters, expired a couple of years ago. So we're in the process of procuring a new vendor that'll provide several hundred more shelters. So we'll be able to expand that program. We also, adjacent to that, have a procurement for a contractor to install and maintain and provide the advertising on those additional shelters. So our current contract covers the shelters that we have, the existing ones. It doesn't have capacity for additional shelters. So that's what that new contract will do. And so that procurement is also underway this year. As I mentioned, we have a CIP project for bus stop ADA accessibility improvements. This very primarily increases the sidewalk area so that we have ADA compliance. However, wherever it's feasible, we add sidewalk space so that in the future we can add a bench and shelter if there's space to do so. Again, we have a focus on disadvantaged communities. I think of the 9 stops that we're looking at now, I believe 8 of them are in disadvantaged communities. And that will continue as we identify additional stops to add to that. We also request whenever an adjacent development is going through the permitting process adjacent to a bus stop, we request that they provide sufficient space for not only the ADA compliance, but also a future bench or a shelter. We're adding restrooms in a couple of different ways. We're working with our local jurisdictions and partners to reopen existing restrooms that are closed in National City, Lemon Grove, and at SDSU. And we're also asking developers at our new TOD projects to include restrooms as they develop their new projects at our MTS stations. So other other CIP projects that were approved as part of the MTS CIP 2025 CIP, upgrading VMS signs. These are the visual message signs at rapid and trolley stations. Many of those are no longer serviceable because of their age, so those will be replaced. And then station upgrades and repairs at a number of locations, 12th and Imperial among them, also El Cajon Transit Center and the Rio Vista Station. The monitoring of policies report that we will be bringing to you in July, again, is required every 3 years, and it requires the approval of this board. Again, the last report came in July of 2021. That report, as well as that policy, the policies that were in effect at that time, will be included with the Title VI program that we'll be submitting, bringing to this board in May of this year and submitting to FTA after that. And that's because that was what was in effect for the vast majority of this 3 years. And the map that you see on the right is just one of the maps and one of the things that is included in that monitoring report. And that just shows the various benches and shelters in the area, in our service area, with the background of the low-income block groups highlighted. We did bring this report to the executive committee last week, and I think we had a very robust discussion, lots of good feedback. So among that feedback is a need to focus on ensuring enough funding towards these amenities in the future, identifying bus stops that don't have shelters and benches, even if it's warranted by ridership, and what those costs for adding the amenities to all those stops. And then looking towards a more aspirational transit amenities plan that could supplement this transit amenities policy, that would again look at all of our wants and needs regardless of the cost. Identification of holes in our system where we don't have access to restrooms, identification of the appropriate number of fare validators at each station, consideration of the impacts of alcohol advertising that you might recall we've approved as a pilot, especially in low-income communities, and then adding adding a equity priority metric, possibly using Cal and Virus Screen instead of just the number of boardings. Again, I mentioned that we did add equity as a metric for adding amenities, but we can certainly do things to make that more robust. So the next step, we will be updating these policies prior to our doing the monitoring report in July of 2024. We'll be bringing that to you in July for your approval. And then that'll be utilized for the next period of 2024 to 2027. And then I want to emphasize that, again, we're going to be bringing the overall Title VI program update, of which these amenities are a part, here in May of 2024. And that'll include a substantial amount of information, not just these policies, but it will include the policies that have been really in effect for the majority of this period, as well as the monitoring report that you all approved in July of 2021. And that'll be coming in May. So with that, happy to open up the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond. Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We do. The original DRA. Please unmute yourself now. Looks like you're still muted. The original DRA, looks like you're still muted.
Yes. So, with all of this, doing two meetings at once, this is really hard to do. My brain can't function. You want to talk, okay, so you guys are talking about civil rights, which is a little bit interesting because you usurp people's civil rights all the time and, don't give them the ability to, just really have what the people need in order to, navigate this realm, because we should be able to have more freedoms than we do. But regardless, when you are focusing on all of these things that you want to do, and if you really want more people to ride this transit, you need to be adding more bathrooms. You need to be doing things that are going to make it more conducive to ride this kind of transportation, because and it's crazy the amounts of money that you are willing to spend on a form of transit that is not used. People drive more, and I know you got to change their behaviors and do all this stuff, and that's why you guys do this, but you spend so much money on trying to get this transit to a place when nobody's riding it. And this money can be spent on other things like infrastructure for storm infrastructure. And I get that you guys have a different thing that you do here, but it's sad to see how much money gets thrown around in the communities and thrown at certain things that you want people to engage in, but we can't even keep up the infrastructure just for the normal everyday stuff that we have to deal with. And so but I really think that you need to be thinking more about bathrooms, because it's ridiculous that there aren't more of them, and with the amount of money that you guys have. You could do it, you just choose not to. And so if you want people to ride, you need to be adding that kind of amenity to this stuff. Unless you want people going on the streets, which is already
Your time has
happening.
expired. That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. We'll open board discussion on this item. This was an informational item, so no motion is needed. And seeing no board discussion, we'll move on to item 24, which is for Chair, Board Member, and CEO communic. Oh, sorry, I didn't see out of the corner of my eye. Director Moreno.
Thank you for this presentation. As was mentioned, we had extensive conversation in the executive committee meeting. And I think this is something, our transit amenities policy is something that I think many folks on the board have been requesting in one way or the other when we talk about bathrooms, when we talk about amenities to our transit riders, essentially where you want to modify this information or the lack of amenities is within this policy. So it's very important, and not just bathrooms. We're talking about benches, trash receptacles, lighting. And in essence, the purpose of doing all this is to attract more riders, which has been my intention since I came onto this board. And so one of the things, and you mentioned it lightly, but I do want to point it out to our board. I asked for prioritization to be based on passenger boarding. And just to see more of their work. I also asked which stops should have enhanced amenities but currently don't. Which stops should have a higher cost for amenities because of space or infrastructure concerns. And I thought our goal should be to develop a plan that would identify every bus stop in our service area that could receive enhanced services and develop a cost estimate for them. I think we should have a transit amenities plan as well as a transit amenities policy. And I asked staff to develop that. Also, in regards to rail, I asked for for the restrooms, right? We asked to take a look at that document and explore the possibility of providing paid access through the Pronto card. Fare validators, I think for a lot of folks that ride the trolley, having one or two fare validators really limits how soon you could validate or if you could validate your Pronto card. And I am concerned that the limited availability and functionality of validators could be the reason behind trolley riders' failures to tap. So I just wanted to highlight that and bring it up to the attention of this board because this is probably, and like I said, the past 5 years, this is the conversation that I've been hearing. There's been a demand, I would say, from this board in regards to restrooms to this body. And this is the document where this can potentially come to fruition. And so I appreciate you guys bringing this forward, and I look forward to the update to my requests. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Moreno. Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. One of the amenities that, in a way, we talked about was the ability to pay by Visa card. And I think we were told an April implementation. Do we have any idea how close we are?
We're really close. We're shooting for the opening day, but we think it might be an opening day soft launch, and then getting it fully communicated to the public a couple weeks later. That's what we're looking at.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Any further board discussion on this item? Seeing none, oh yes, Director Mendoza.
I just wanted to piggyback on Board Member Moreno. What you mentioned the Lemon Grove station, and there is a bathroom there. It's been closed for many years. It's not an MTS bathroom. It's actually owned by the city of Lemon Grove, and it's on Lemon Grove property. It was closed because of vandalism issues, maintenance issues. And but I just wanted to express that the current city council is in favor of partnering with MTS in any way possible to get this bathroom back open again. That station is heavily used, and there's a lot of people taking long bus rides and then transferring to the trolley and then back the other way. So, I think it would be a great place to focus on. And I'm not saying that just because I'm from Lemon Grove, but the bathroom is actually fairly new and it's in pretty good shape, but it just does need to be reconfigured in such a way to dissuade the vandalism that took place in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mendoza. Any further board discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 24, which is for Chair, Board Member, and CEO Communications. And we'll begin with Director Leyva Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, Chair. So 2 council meetings ago, it was brought to the city council in Imperial Beach in regards to the Rapid 227 bus line. First and foremost, I want to thank Dennis and Beverly for you guys being involved in this whole process. It takes a lot of the heat off of me personally because, everyone is addressing and reaching out to me in regards to, the modifications that we've discussed. So moving forward, changing the route, getting it off at 3rd, moving it to 9th, and then possibly smaller buses and then the wait times that are on Seacoast. I'm very excited to move forward, primarily because a lot of the residents were concerned about the timing and the length of time that this whole process is going to take. I'm just real appreciative because it was a good meeting and it was voted by the council to keep the route with just the modifications that were proposed. And also too, I appreciate you coming out this Saturday to the farmer's market to do outreach. I'll be out there as well, so that if you need any help or assistance, I'll be out in the city booth. And it's supposed to be really nice weather and they got great food. So thank you.
And that'll be Beverly and our other planner, Larry.
Okay, awesome. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Leyva Gonzalez. Director Mendoza, did you have a comment?
Yes, I actually had 2 comments. One, I don't know if everyone heard, but I'm sitting here because Councilmember Gastel had a heart issue about 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we had bypass surgery. He was in the hospital for about a week. He's home resting now, and we want him to recover, so we're not going to let him come to any meetings for a while. So you may see me again next month, but I just wanted to let everyone know that he is doing well. He's recovering. And then I just had a comment. First of all, I want to thank MTS for getting right on the Orange Line tracks after the horrible flood that we had down Imperial Avenue. Was just a river, Lemon Grove Avenue as it turns into Imperial Avenue. And but I did notice that there's in the bike lanes along Imperial Avenue, particularly more so in Encanto than in Lemon Grove, but also in Encanto, a lot of the rocks from the trolley tracks have come over into the bike lanes, and it's made it like impossible for those, for people to use those bike lanes. So I don't know if that's going to be up to the city to clean that up or MTS, but if we could put the rocks back where they belong, that would be great. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mendoza. And I know Director Gastel has been in our thoughts, so thank you for letting us know that he's home and recovering well. Let's go to CEO Cooney.
Yeah, just a couple things. We had some good news with the signing of the federal appropriations bill, and we did get a couple of community project funding awards, formerly known as earmarks. Congressman Vargas gave us 2. One is for $1.7 million for the design of our SeaTac campus. And then he also gave us money to upgrade the variable message signs and the PA system on the Blue Line. Congressmember Peters also gave us one, and that is to upgrade the VMS MPA on the Green Line. That all enhances as well the fact that we have money in our CIP for the Orange Line upgrades already, and they will include VMS and PA's upgrades. So that's a real helpful thing for accessibility, reliability for our customers and communications. So, oh, I also wanted to mention that Monday is Transit Driver Appreciation Day. Transit Driver Appreciation Day, we do this each year. It's a nationally known concept, but this year we will be doing a whole week worth of festivities and giveaways and things like that for our operators. Monday, however, we will be holding events at the locations where the drivers are operating out of. So we'll be doing that. We also, this year, a really interesting thing that our communications department came up with was to put on an online platform for a kudos board. So anyone can sign into that and say their appreciation for their driver, for a trolley operator, or in general for the people who are moving people from place to place. I'll be sending something out with a link for all of you if you want to engage in that. And then also we're offering that if any of you would like us to join you to go to one of the transit centers, trolley stations in your own districts, we'd be happy to join you if we wanted to give out, little snacks or something like that in appreciation. This is actually Vice Chair Goebel. He did this last year to much appreciation from the drivers. So just let us know and we'll be happy to help accommodate that.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Cooney. All right, before we move into closed session, let's see if we have any public comment on the closed session agenda. Clerk, do we have anyone wishing to speak on the closed session items?
We do. Daniel Smith, please make your way to the podium.
Morning, Board. Thank you for taking your time to deal with item number 27. I'm Daniel Smith here from 40 Properties. It's been quite a long process to get this property through the acquisition process. And there's been a lot of variables along the way with the easements and so forth. And we sure want to thank Karen and Sean and Heather for their dedication to work on this for all this time. We're optimistic to build a housing project adjacent to the Grantville Trolley Station and provide some decent access to that station for all of our benefit. Thank you very much for your help.
The original DRA, please unmute yourself now.
Yes, so I was actually wondering if this was going to be about the eminent domain that you were talking about, but that gentleman gave me a little bit of insight. So, more housing densely populated by the transit, which seemingly sounds good, but it's also, with all of the infrastructure that you're bringing in for these zero emissions, which is a propaganda in its name, but you're actually going to be causing people to be, highly radiated, but the more you put them by the transit centers that are going to be charging these buses, but the more that we bring in Wi-Fi and all of that as well. And then I'm wondering with your labor negotiations, because you guys know what's happening at the transit centers with the illegals. And even though you don't want to talk to people about it in the public and acknowledge that it's happening, I mean, you had to mitigate having those, these two groups of cleanup crews come twice a day, specifically for this in the last couple of weeks. So you've had talks about this behind closed doors because you knew there was a need. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there cleaning up like they are. And, they said it's only been for a few weeks. So, I'm wondering how much else you're discussing as far as, just even needing for the airport shuttle or different things to have more drivers, more people providing the transit to get these people out of the public's eye pretty quick, because, you can't have them just sitting there all day long, but you've increased the times that you're doing the airport shuttle, because it's definitely not been that way all the time. But when you have people sitting there waiting, You got to get them out of there as quick as possible. So it's interesting that you guys will do things behind closed doors, but you don't want to be transparent with the public about what's actually happening and what we are facilitating and paying for, which is human trafficking.
Your time
Whether
has
or not
expired. That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. The next Board of Directors meeting is scheduled for April 25th at 9 a.m. And at this time, we'll move into closed session.
Reporting out of closed session, item number 27, closed session conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8 regarding 5801 and 5805 Fairmont Avenue. The board received a report and gave instructions to negotiators. As it relates to item number 28, closed session conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. And relating to the IBEW Local 465 and the International Association of Sheet, Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers. The board received a report and gave instructions to labor negotiators.
This meeting is now adjourned.